And that's how we all got into it in the late 70s, early 80s from the film Quadrophenia.
Quadrophenia.
Such a huge influence in England, and that carried on to Germany and around the world.
The film is about a young working class boy who was 18 in 1964, which is exactly my circumstances. So I knew the background and the emotions and the territory very, very well. I knew the styles very well. And so in some ways I was a perfect person for it. You know. When I first became involved with Quadrophenia, there was a script in existence that had been written by a fan, but wasn't a script. It was 230 pages. And basically it was just some loose idea based on the album. And the album had been conceived by Pete Townsend of The Who. And the album had come out about 4 years before we made the film. When I saw the script, I realized it wasn't a script. So then I started rewriting or writing. And let's say we wrote the script, myself and a guy called Dave Humphreys. And then that wasn't still quite good enough. So I brought in another guy, Martin Stellman, and then him and I had a go. But all the time we were writing it, we were in pre-production. So we had a very unusual pre-production for Quadrophenia. It was very short. I was contracted in June, and I started filming in September. Now there was no script at that point, so we were casting and looking for locations for a script that we just had a sketch of. And so I was continuing writing the script, finding the actors, finding locations, and it all came together at the last, just before we started filming. So it was very quick. And therefore, rather good, rather fun, a very energetic process. Yeah, what interested for me about Quadrophenia, I must say to you that really, that I was very much interested in, I was interested in the style, obviously, because I grew up with it. But I was very much more interested in the emotional aspect of being young, and what it meant. And for me, at that time, most films that were being made about young people, or most films in general, were about winners. Most Hollywood films about, the guy, he's the best fighter, he's the best shagger, he's the coolest looking guy. And I wanted to make a film about a loser, because I believe that 99% of the people are losing 99% of the time. And so I wanted to say it's okay, 18 not to be great at sex, because it takes a while. It's okay not to be the best fighter, because in fact that's quite uncool in the end. It's okay to be, not to be the most stylish. And the film seems to have an enduring quality for many reasons. It endures for the mods and the scooter people. It also endures for young people because they get some kind of, it makes them feel relaxed about being young. It makes them feel relaxed about being incompetent. And it's okay, they see somebody else lose and he experiences it for them. So I think that's the aspect of the film that most interests me, to be honest with you. In fact, I wasn't a mod myself, but I was a beatnik, if you like. It was pre-Flower Power. I was like into jazz and Band the Bomb and so forth. But I was also a traveler, and I was hitchhiking in Turkey. And I came back in 1962, and everybody had become a mod. Everybody in the town, all my mates. They'd all cut their hair, they'd all change their clothes, their shoes, they were dancing differently, they were taking speed. The whole town turned mod. And working with The Who was fantastic. I think Pete Townsend is a genius, in a way. And I think he's a great social chronicler of the time, especially of working class ideas and youth. He knows him very well. He was inspired to do Quadrophenia because there'd been an article about a young mod who jumped over to commit suicide at Beachy Head. And that had inspired him to write the concept album. What he had done was he brought to me a remix of the music, but it was a complete change. What he'd done, he'd gone orchestral, like he had with Tommy. And so suddenly he presented me with a stack of tapes, which were Quadrophenia on strings. And I had to say to him very clearly, look, I don't think that's going to work for me, because one is that this is a street movie. And I think we should have, music of the street, which is guitars, drums. This is, rock and roll. And two, I don't want to just do a copy of Tommy. I don't want to suddenly do a rock opera. I want to make a very different style of film. I'm a different kind of filmmaker. And basically, having invested in an orchestral version of the score, he dropped it in favor of the original, which was fantastic of him. I thought that was very, he said, okay, you do your film, and very graciously he said that, without edge. This is a bizarre thing to say, but the music was a little hindrance in one way, because Quadrophenia, I think, is a magnificent album, but there are these big operatic pieces at the very end, big tracks. And I was making this street movie, which didn't require that kind of music, and I wanted to to be realistic, to use other tracks that would be favoured at the time. A bit of Georgie Fame, a bit of, you know, other things, and a bit of ska. And I got Pete's permission to do that. So we'd bring out a new album which was half other tracks and half Who music. But I was left with a large portion of Who music that I hadn't used. And it worked well for me because I then, in the end, when I wanted to make his jump off the cliff or the ride towards the cliff big and dramatic, and when he'd gone into a drug-descended depression and now he was thinking about suicide, that's where the Quadrophenia music came in really handy. But if you watch the film, the last act is very different from the first two, because he's in the first two acts, he's with the group, he's with the crowd, he's at work, he's with his family, he's in the street. But as his brain starts to go elsewhere, the music expands, which is perfect for the Quadrophenia album in a way. I had 4 days to shoot the riots, basically. And I found it quite easily. I did a street map, and I planned my campaign like a military strategy, and I worked out who was going to go there, who was going to go there, how it would start, how it would reach its climax, and how they would shut them off with the buses and all that. And I remember the police chief at the time saying, "Oh, that's a great strategy. You know, you've obviously..." And it was quite easy. I was aided and abetted by the real mods. The scooter clubs of Great Britain came to Brighton, and then we got some rockers in too, and then we had some professional extras playing policemen. Then we had crowds of people watching, thousands of people who were free extras. So these big scenes on the beach. And there's one moment when we have police horses too. And we have one moment when we have 3 cameras going, and all these different things take place. And there's 14 separate actions taking place at the same time. It's quite dangerous because there are people fighting, hitting each other with sticks. There's police horses jumping through. And we set off the first take, and I thought, wow, that looks fantastic. And the cameraman said to me, "Camera operator, look, it's not going to work, Gov." He said that the police guys were all laughing and joking, the professional extras. Some of them even had their helmets on back to front. So look, I was very angry about that. So I set it up again, and I thought, this is getting quite dangerous to do. Set it up again. I was about to say action, and suddenly I had an inspiration. I ran across the beach, and there's big stones, quite a difficult beach. I remember running, "Hold everybody!" And I ran across to these group of mods from the scooter club. I said, "You know, these policemen are fucking up the scene. Get them for real." And I ran back to my camera and I went, "Action!" And then suddenly the mods waded into the special extras, the coppers, and beat the hell out of them. And then this real fight started, and I thought, looks good. And everybody was rather proud, you know. No injury. I think one broken leg in the whole riot scene, and that was an accident. It wasn't my fault. We had 3. We had 3, and I think we might have only destroyed 2. We destroyed 2, I think. And I was in a helicopter at one point, and the stunt department worked out the trajectory of the scooter, and with weight, how far it would go out to sea before it dropped. You know, we were placing out different cameras. And at one point, I was in the helicopter, you know, facing it as it came out, and they miscalculated the weight. And I was almost killed by a flying scooter. It's the funniest thing. I thought I was sitting in this, the helicopter was hovering, and we got the cameras there. And I suddenly saw this massive silver scooter hurtling towards me. I thought, oh my God, death by scooter. It was so weird, that. Anyway, they dropped just in front of us, you know. But it was like a missile, you know. Well, it's very interesting. More than half the people think that he jumped off the cliff. You know, and what I wanted to do was to leave it with that ambiguity, because I wanted those that felt that he was gone. To me, it was a symbolic death. At first, originally, I was going to make him jump, like the mod in the news cuttings, the original mod who jumped off the cliff. But in the end, I thought, yeah, and I filmed the death first. It was the first sequence I filmed. It was going along the cliff and going over, because the weather was good. And I was very pleased to get that in the can. And somebody had told me, if you're going to do a big sequence, get it in the can first before all the money goes. So I shot that end first. And just as we were finishing, we saw this beautiful sunset, this ribbon of purple and gold light on the sea. And for no reason, no logic, I said, let's shoot that, and let's have Jimmy walking towards us, as if he's come away from the cliff. And that was an afterthought, and I held that, and I had that in the cutting room. And I always intended to put it on the front of the film, the way it was. But even then I was still thinking as I was shooting that he killed himself. Then I realised when I put the film together, well, there he is, he's walking away. You never see him on the bike at the end. And perhaps my subconscious was telling me, this is a symbolic death and this boy shouldn't die. But some people still think he dies, you know.